So the plan, like I said, is to talk about personal development plan (PDPs). And for those of us that are already in the training program, the GP training program, we must have come across this term. We have an idea of what the personal development plan is. And really today, we're just going to talk around what the portfolio requirements for the PDP is, and why is it important to do a personal development plan. How do we come about personal development plan ideas, and what is the technique of making sure you get good personal development plan in terms of making an entry in your portfolio and in terms of actually doing something that helps you improve yourself. And the reason behind doing any of it really is it helps you identify what's areas that you might be able to improve on and set sort of like an action plan of how you go about doing that. And it's important you do that because you sort of supervisor and the people looking at your portfolio are looking to see what plans you have for your own personal development. And that is part of your workplace based assessment. Okay. So for the purposes of the portfolio, if you're just starting ST1 this August, for the next 6 months or even for the next 1 year, you're expected to be putting in personal development plan. The sweet spot usually is before you go into a new rotation list. Think of three or four, between 3 and 5 things that you want to achieve with that placement. Then you write it up as a personal development plan, the way we're going to talk about further down the line, essentially. And like I said initially, the importance of this is it helps to track your progress. And the first step in doing that is actually knowing, okay, what you need to do a self-evaluation first. Okay. If you're starting a new rotation, for example, in acute medicine, or you're starting a new rotation in A&E, and you realize, okay, you've never really managed acute exacerbation of asthma before. So that is a self-awareness that you have a learning need. Okay, there's an area that you can improve on. You've never actually managed acute exacerbation of asthma. So you've self-identified that that's the first evaluation that you've done for yourself. So you can now set a goal. Okay, I want to improve that. Now you're setting a goal for yourself, how you're going to go about doing that. And you can see that is that if you do that consistently for the period of your training, outside of your training, you will continue to grow in terms of your career because you'll be using that as a tool to learn new things and improve yourself. So the best way to get sort of ideas for your personal development plan is, before we talk about the techniques and all that, is think about the posting that you're doing at the moment. That's one. Think about generally in terms of your training. That's two. So in terms of the posting that you're doing at the moment, a very helpful guide is if you go on Google and you type RCGP condensed curriculum. Okay, I've just shared the link with you on the chat box. So you should come up with this page of the RCGP website with a condensed curriculum guide of all the different areas, clinical experience group, specialties, and what have you. So if you're going into any of that particular specialty, for example, you're going into ENT, go into that condensed guide and see what does the RCGP expect that you learn for the purpose of becoming a GP. Then you ask yourself, which of these things do I need to improve on, or do I need to work on? Because you've done the self-assessment. Okay, you realize, okay, this is an area that I'm not very good at. Okay, this is how I might go about solving it. So the first step is really to get an idea, or PDP idea, is go on this super condensed guide of the specialty you're about to do and think to yourself, okay, which of these places am I deficient in? Which of them can I improve on? That is a perfect way to get an idea. Okay, it's a perfect way to get an idea of what your PDPs might be. So now you've got the idea of what the PDP, what you want to work on. Brings us to the other part of the technique. So how do you go about writing it up? Thankfully, in the portfolio, if you follow the add a PDP um, button on your 14 fish portfolio, it will sort of itemize the way you write your PDPs. It will ask you what's the title, what's the time that you are expected to complete this, how will you demonstrate that you've completed it. So it will ask you all that question, okay, which is good. So after you've filled all that bit out, essentially what it's going to be doing is helping you follow this sort of SMART technique. And the SMART technique is just an acronym for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. So that is what a SMART PDP, when you hear them say, use the phrase SMART PDP, that's what it means. So you need to make your PDP smart. Another way sometimes that you might come up with an idea of a PDP is after you've done a clinical case review entry. So in the clinical case review entry, you had an encounter with a patient, and as a result of that encounter, you discovered a physician learning need, something that an area that you are deficient on, or something that you want to go and work on. Okay, so that can be also a source of generation of a PDP for you. Not just you're starting a rotation, this is what I want to learn from this rotation. In the course of the rotation, in the course of your day-to-day working, you have a patient encounter and you realize, okay, I need to go and work on this. Okay, that is another way you come up with a PDP idea as well, right? So always make all the PDP ideas smart. So actually, when you're writing it down, write it that way. Write S with a dash, a hyphen in front of the S, and say what is the specific thing you want to learn. Like the example we gave earlier, which is you new to accident and emergency department, you've never managed acute exacerbation of asthma. So that's very specific. You want to learn the management of acute exacerbation of asthma. That's very specific. Is it measurable? How are you going to measure that you've done this? Okay. So I'm going to try as much as possible to see 2 cases of acute exacerbation and see and manage 2 cases of acute exacerbation of asthma. So that's how you're measuring it now. So you want to see 2 cases. So hopefully the first one and the second one will cement that learning for you. And is this achievable? Yes, you're in A&E. So you say, yes, it's achievable because I'm in A&E and we frequently get this sort of cases coming through the door. Okay, it's relevant. It's relevant to your training because as a GP, you need to know how to identify acute exacerbation of asthma, and you need to know what to start, what the initial steps are in terms of the management. Okay, you need to be knowing that. You need to know that. And of course, if you're sending the patient to hospital, you need to communicate with them what will happen to them in hospital. So that's relevant to you, GP. And time bound, you need to put a time to it. Going to tie all of it up for this particular PDP idea. I want to improve my management of management of acute exacerbation of asthma by seeing 2 patients in the next 1 month. And this is relevant because it's relevant for me to be able to identify and manage these sort of cases. That is the short gist of it. Okay, so we've talked about how the PDP, what the portfolio requires. So every year you're expected to have personal development plan. You're expected to have them. So you need to get in the sweet spot is somewhere between 3 and 5. You can get more than 5, it's okay, but just make sure you get in between 3 and 5 at least every year, giving personal development plans. Talk about why it's important because you need it for to develop your skills. It's a tool to help you develop your skills. It's a tool for your supervisors and the people looking at your portfolio for your RP and what have you to see your progression and how you're doing self-directed learning, which is really good, demonstrates a lot of good capabilities for you. And we've talked about how to get PDP ideas. We talked about the condensed curriculum, the RCGP condensed curriculum for when you're going into a post. And we also talked about how if you had a patient encounter and from that encounter you realize that you need to learn something, or you realize that it's something that the patient didn't completely go away understanding, then you're working on that as well. And then we talked about how to sort of the technique of making this happen. So you identify the goals, you're breaking down to okay how sort of small chunks for yourself. So we talked about the technique of making it smart, which is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. We talked about that as well. We give an example of an accurate exhibition of ourselves. These are other examples of how you can just structure a personal development plan for yourself and make it an action plan. A common question around PDPs is what is the difference between a PDP and an action plan? So it's essentially the same thing, but the action plan in your portfolio is sort of the PDPs that your supervisor picks for you. And that is usually secondary to either you've done your ESR, your interim ESR, and from that you agree on an action plan for based on what they picked up from your portfolio after looking at your portfolio. So, for example, they look at a specific capability and realize, okay, you're not quite hitting that capability. So they can drop an action plan for you to be able to achieve that. And that usually follows the same SMART technique as well. So they draw an action plan for you. So it's very similar to your personal development plan, but the personal development plan really is for you. It's your responsibility to put it in your portfolio, track it, and make sure that you're achieving it. Okay. So to conclude, just make sure that when you put in your PDPs, you're checking and making sure that yes, you're actually achieving what you set out to achieve. Are you making any progress? The way they've made it in the portfolio, you can always go back in and edit and say and add a few more details and stuff like that, which is really good and handy because it is expected that as you research into trying to achieve your personal development plan, you might actually realize okay, there's something you could make this a bit smarter, or you could realize okay, maybe this is not the best PDP and revise the PDP in totality. Okay, so the portfolio allows you to go in and review your PDPs as often as you want and sort of change some details in them as well. Okay, so we've come to the question and answer bit. I'll just rattle through that. If you have a question now, you just either share that on the chat or just raise your hand and I'll call you up and we can do that. So the first question, okay, let's just join. So our admin has kindly shared our social media platform on the chat as well. You can follow the account so you can have a bit more information about all our products and services. Are there any questions about PDPs? What PDPs are we working on? Victoria, is there any PDP you put on your portfolio that you're hoping that we can help with? Suggest ways to fine tune it. Yeah, so PDPs is very straightforward. It was meant to be a very short session today just to remind us of the need to just keeping an eye on that as part of our workplace-based assessment. Often at times people forget that they need to be putting in PDPs and it's a common comment at the ACP, which is the annual review of competency progression that you will have every year. So they might comment and say, oh, you've not been doing PDPs. Okay, so you need to make sure that you're staying on top of that. Just make sure, like I said, 3 is a good number. You just make 3 PDPs every 6 months. And if you don't finish the PDPs, you can always say you're going to carry it over for the next review period. And if you have justification for why you didn't finish them, which is good. All right, so we go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, sorry, thank you. Just a quick one. Just from the last thing you said, let's say it was flagged up in your RSCP and they say you need to do some smart PDPs. And then you now discover that how do you it's like, so the previous PDPs looks like they've not really been tallying. And then do you now have to go back to all the PDPs, or do you now have to put PDPs based on the particular rotation where you are, or at that point where they've asked for the PDP? Do you have to go and align the other PDPs and make sure that they've all followed?
Okay. Well, thank you for that question. A good question. So you don't have to go back and change your previous PDP. If you're in a new session, a new review period, just make sure that they are advising you against next time. Okay, just make sure that the next PDP you're putting in is smart. You're actually writing. If I were you, what I would do is, if I'm writing my PDP, after I've filled it out in those boxes that the PDP page gives me, in that last bit, I will also write S, put a hyphen there, write why it is specific. I'll write M, why it is measurable. I'll write why it is measurable. I'll actually write it that way so that you see that you've taken on board their feedback, what they've said. So you've made your PDP smart. Okay, is what I will do. I will not go back and start editing the previous ones. I'll just, going forward, I'll just work on the PDPs like this.
Okay. So just from the present rotation you are, and
yes,
that makes
present rotation. Yeah.
You just put the PDPs that you want to kind of work on or work with, and then you suggested make them smart and just put SMART and then put those PDPs so that they can see that you've actually taken their feedback on board.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So you don't need to go back to the previous ESRs and all this stuff.
You don't have to.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Thanks for
So we're still taking questions before we round up. We have a minute or two to go before we round up. Just taking more questions before we do so. Go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, thank you for very informative session. So I just want to clarify, do we need in every rotation 2 PDPs or 3?
2 or 3 is fine.
2 or 3 is fine, okay.
2 or 3
it's
is
not
fine.
like mandatory 3.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, if you even do 1 for the whole of rotation is okay, but just, I will recommend 2 or 3. 3 is a sweet spot. Just 3 PDPs, 3 things that you intend to learn from that rotation is okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, it's me again. So for each PDP, do you have to put an action plan for each PDP?
So the only time you actually be doing an action plan yourself, okay, there's a bit on your portfolio where there's action plan. So the only time you're doing that is when you're preparing for your ESR or your interim ESR. So after you've linked all your evidences for each capability, they will ask you to put at least 3 action plans before your ESR. Otherwise, the action plan, what you do regularly is just the PDP. So focus on the PDPs. The action plan is only when you're preparing for your ESR or interim ESR. That's when you need to do an action plan.
Okay, so if they, let's say they've asked you to do a smart PDP and then you just do the smart PDP, you don't need to put any action plan to that, right?
No. But if you followed our conversations very clearly, you see that in one of the slides we mentioned how at the end an action plan essentially is how you intend to go about what you've planned to do, right? So your PDP essentially is also an action plan. So except what they are referring to is, do you have an action plan for this, your PDP?
No, just PDP.
So if that's not what they mean, just a PDP. So just do your PDP the way we talked about with the technique of a SMART. Just make sure that it is specific, it is measurable, it's achievable, it's relevant, and it's time bound. You've put a time to it. You don't just say, I just want to. An example of a bad PDP is, I want to get better at communication skills. That's a bad PDP because it's not communication skills is very broad, too broad. Okay, too broad. It's not time bound there. It's relevant, but it's not measurable. You've not mentioned how you measure it. Sometimes one of the ways you demonstrate you're going to measure a PDP is saying, I'm going to do a reflection about it. For example, I say I want to go and learn about management of fungal toenail infection. Okay, I'm going to read up an article on red whale about the management of fungal toenail infection and reflect on it in my portfolio. Yeah, that's smart. If you take it out one by one, you see that it's going to be smart, it's specific, it's measurable, achievable, relatable, it's relevant, and it's time bound because I want to do that in the next 1 week or the next 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
But your hand is still up. Is that a legacy hand or you have another question? I think that's a legacy hand.
Sorry, it was by mistake. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I don't have any question. Thank you.
Okay, that's fine. So finally, the last plug is, as you see on our chat box, is that with the Learning Academy, the Easy Learn Academy, we have a good number of programs, Epic and Prime Plus, that caters to all sort of your training needs. And usually this is best to engage with this as early on as possible so that you don't have to rush when you come towards exam and you're trying to pay for expensive courses and what have you, just before your exam, after you book your exam. So it's best to sort of get engaged with them beforehand and to follow our social media handles, go on the YouTube channel and see our previous videos and share this with your colleagues as well. Okay, it was lovely having a chat with you all. Just post your questions on the group chat if you have any that you thought of after the session. Okay, take care.
Thank you.
Bye.